We've all had that teacher that influenced us for better or for worse. But what if a teacher completely turned your world upside down? This movie's full of drama, spicy relationships, and obsession. This is 2009's Cracks. Spoiler alert, while I might be giving you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. And for those of you that need to hear this, this is just a movie. All stunts are for the sake of story and shouldn't be attempted on your own. Viewer discretion is advised. We open up looking over the grounds at the all-girls boarding school, and we find Di sitting on a boat with Ms. G. She thanks her for a book that she let her borrow, and we see that Ms. G is promoting content that might not be too accepted by the other teachers or parents. Later, the school gathers for their Sunday morning service, and Ms. G makes her way down the aisle in a sultry, late fashion. Di notices her, and after the service, she confesses that she's had lustful thoughts to the priest. Afterwards, Di goes outside to join her classmates, and she admits to confessing to everything aside from the book that Ms. G gave her. She doesn't want her to get in trouble, and she doesn't think that they can stay pure forever. At lunch, Di shows why she's the captain of her social team. I'm surprised Di isn't ruling over a country already. This girl treats her classmates like she's running a small dictatorship behind the scenes of the school. I don't know how she got put in charge of the team, but no one's going to oppose her, that's for sure. After dealing with some riffraff on the team, Ms. Neven shows up to tell Di and her team about a new transfer student that's coming all the way from Spain. After their meal, the girls go to their class with Ms. G, and we see firsthand how she teaches them from the morals of the world. She tells them that the most important part of life is desire, and if they simply desire something, they can achieve it. Later, in another class, the girls are taught about how too much ambition can actually lead to ruin. Meanwhile, Ms. Neven goes to the ferry to fetch the new girl, Fiamma. When Fiamma arrives at the school, she's led to her quarters, and Di gives her a quick crash course on the rules. Fiamma's first order of business is actually to stand up to Di and knock her down off her pedestal. But Di won't go down that easily. The tension between the two of them is palpable, but Di leaves it alone for the time being. That night, Fiamma stays awake to watch the others, and she witnesses one of the girls having a nightmare about her mother. The next day, Fiamma shows up late to Ms. G's class, but now that she's arrived, they can commence with diving lessons. Di goes first, and it becomes clear that Ms. G holds Di in the highest regards. When it comes time for Fiamma's dive, she goes above and beyond with her skill, and Ms. G tells Di that the new standard has been set. Well, if there is a way to light a fire in a rivalry, Ms. G just did it. Later, the team goes for a nature walk, and we find out that Fiamma actually has asthma. She shows the girls her inhaler of the time, and they make fun of her. She decides that she'd rather be alone back at the school, so she breaks off and heads back. During classes, everyone sits to write letters back to their families, but Fiamma soon finds out that all letters are checked by the teacher before being sent off. She was writing a letter to a boy named Pablo, but after seeing this, she decides to crumple up her letter to her love interest. That day at lunch, Ms. G hands out the mail, and Fiamma gets a huge package filled with goodies. She shares with the rest of the team, and everyone enjoys the sweets and delectables, aside from Di. The girls have Fiamma tell them a story from her homeland, and we see that Di and Poppy want nothing to do with her antics and stories. During the story, even Ms. G becomes intoxicated by Fiamma's personality. That evening, we see that Ms. G even slipped one of Fiamma's baked goods away somehow, and she looks through postcards of Fiamma's that she's stolen away. That night, Ms. G slips into the team's quarters, and she wakes everyone up for a midnight swimming lesson. They make their way to the dock where Ms. G strips down and dives in. The other girls look on as she swims further into the lake, and after she invites them in, they all strip down and jump in as well. They play a game together, and Ms. G asks Fiamma to talk about her traveling adventures. After they talk for a moment, Ms. G explains to Fiamma that she's not like the other girls. She tells her that the other girls are still waiting for their lives to begin, and she'll leave her teaching post when the girls leave school. The next day, Ms. G goes through Fiamma's records and reads more about her background. She finds out that Fiamma was sent away to a school after a scandal was found out where she was getting too friendly with a peasant boy. Kinda want to know what drew the royalty of Spain to send Fiamma here. This seems like a normal, everyday girls' boarding school. Don't they have some closer to home? Either way, things don't get easier for Fiamma. Di continues to make her life hell during flower arrangement classes, and the rivalry grows even more. Di definitely fits at a school like this. She seems like the type that'll be Queen Bee during school, but the real world will knock her down immediately. During class, Ms. G shows up and steals the girls away to go for a dive, but Fiamma stays behind. During their time at the lake, Ms. G happens to look up to the tree line, and she spots Fiamma watching from a distance. When they all go inside, Ms. G tells the girls stories about her world travels, and Fiamma finds the postcards that she holds onto for her. When Fiamma sits down to listen to Ms. G's stories, she recognizes the story from a book she read before. She calls Ms. G out subtly, but Dai doesn't appreciate Fiamma's words. Fiamma tells her the exact book she remembers reading the story from, and she seems content. Later at diving practice, Ms. G is very anxious, and Fiamma starts to have an asthma attack. I'm sorry, but Ms. G just gives her a spoonful of some random substance, and she's supposed to be okay with whatever it is? If that wasn't enough, Ms. G makes her do another dive even though she's wheezing like a deflating balloon. It works out for everyone, but that feels like a really reckless move. Then Ms. G creepily shows up in the changing room and tells her she's the best. Yeah, thanks for almost killing me. Later, Ms. G catches up with the girls as they draw nature, and she asks if they've seen Fiamma. They all tell her that Fiamma wasn't too happy earlier, but they haven't seen her. Dai goes on a mission with Ms. G to help find Fiamma, and they find her floating in a rowboat by the shore. Fiamma's not happy about Ms. G following after her, and she tells her that her girls will leave her soon enough. This makes Ms. G very unsettled, and it only gets worse when she goes to town to get supplies for the school. Ms. G might talk about grand adventures, but her nerves in town make her seem like she's never left the school grounds since she was a girl there herself. Every little sound and all the bystanders seem to make her an anxious mess, and she rushes back to the school as soon as she gets the treats for her girls. This woman's literally trying to buy Fiamma's favor with baked goods. What makes it even worse is the fact that Fiamma tries to share with the others to show that she's trying to be friendly with them. But all they see is how much favor Ms. G is showing her. Well, here goes Dai and Poppy. Sure enough, Dai gathers items from all the girls in the dorm, and she takes Fiamma to the gates with the bag full of food and money. She sends her on her way and tells her to never come back. To top it off, Dai chucks rocks at Fiamma as she runs away. Really now? That seems a little bit like overkill. Fiamma's going willingly. When the school finds out that Fiamma's gone, they come to the girls to ask what happened. But Dai and the others tell them that Fiamma lives by her own rules. The entire school goes on a hunt for Fiamma, but by the end of the day, no one can find her. When Dai goes to Ms. G's room that night, she asks why Ms. G is so cross with her, and Ms. G tells her to remember her place. Eventually, they find Fiamma, and she's brought back to the dorm where some of the girls show how happy they are to have her back. The next day, things go back to normal, but Fiamma mentions the idea of competing against another team. Now the other girls join Fiamma in wondering why they never compete against another team. But Ms. G is beside herself. She storms off, and that night, Dai confronts Fiamma about thinking how her actions affect everyone, including Ms. G. Fiamma mentions that all she cares about is going home, and Dai points out that they all do at some point. I always forget that there are still schools like this out there. Part of me wants to ask what you would do in a situation like this, but then I remember that this is real for some people. An entire childhood away from family and completely alone. Would it be easier to know you don't have a family to wait for? The next day, Fiamma starts being more of a team player with Dai, and their rivalry starts to melt away. Later, Dai includes Fiamma in the daily frivolities, but Ms. G seems to have her guard up still. That night, a storm rolls in, but the girls have a midnight makeup feast in their room. They dress up as royalty and common folk, and they have a divination dinner where they hope to have a vision of their future lover. Amazingly, someone snatched a bottle of wine, and pretty soon here, they're going to have a whole bunch of drunk little girls. Sorry, make that 2 bottles of wine. Little do they know that a very antsy Ms. G is smoking downstairs, listening to their shenanigans. Just then, a teacher shows up to stop the party, but Ms. G steps in to say that she gave permission. The midnight feast rages on, and Ms. G wonders if she should stop them before things go too far. Suddenly, the girls hear footsteps coming from the hallway. When Ms. G opens the door, she finds the room is completely torn up, and Fiamma is drunk as a skunk. Ms. G tells the girls to make sure they clean up the room, and she'll hide Fiamma until she's sober. Once Ms. G gets Fiamma to her quarters, she tells a passed-out drunk Fiamma that she'll do anything for her. She tells her that they'll see the world together, but then she unties her dress and kisses her. Meanwhile, Dai's wandering the corridors outside, and she peeks through the door to Ms. G's room. When she sees Ms. G getting personal with Fiamma, it seems to tear her whole world apart. The next day, Dai starts to see the devotion some of the girls have for Fiamma, but Ms. G seems more concerned about how Fiamma will handle the whole situation when she's around the other girls. Fiamma storms through the grounds, and the girls spot Ms. G chasing after her. The girls speculate what's going on, and Dai tells them that Fiamma has seduced Ms. G. This is one of those times that everyone's at fault. Ms. G is way out of line, but everyone deserves to be punished for something in this movie. When Dai comes over to Ms. G, the teacher literally hands her a cigarette and tells her she's going to have to go. She tells her that Fiamma is going to spread lies. This movie went from 0 to 100 really quick. Ms. G puts on quite the performance though. She gets Dai in such an uproar that she gathers the other girls and marches into the woods after Fiamma. Eventually, they come across Fiamma at a stream, and Fiamma drags her by her hair through the woods to tell the girls what really happened. Fiamma uses her inhaler, but Dai grabs that in the heat of the argument. Fiamma tries to point out that they need to tell someone what Ms. G did to her, but Dai won't have it. A little schoolyard brawl ensues, and Ms. G watches as Fiamma runs from the other girls through the woods. The girls catch up to her in one of the nearby ruins, and they beat her while she has an asthma attack. When they finally stop, they notice her breathing, and Dai sends the girls to get help. Little does she know that Ms. G is waiting nearby. When Dai goes to give Fiamma her inhaler, Ms. G intervenes and sends Dai to go get the headmistress. Do not leave that woman alone with her. As an actress, Eva Green is phenomenal, but I've seen her play the villain too well to trust her in a good role. You don't leave her alone with anyone. Once Ms. G is alone with Fiamma, she tries to whisper sweet nothings into her ear, and she keeps her from getting a hold of her inhaler. Fiamma begs for mercy, but Ms. G holds her down and sends her off to sleep. Soon, Fiamma breathes her last breath, and Ms. G lays her down on the ground. Just then, Dai shows back up ahead of the teachers, and she watches as Ms. G plants the inhaler in Fiamma's hand. See, that's the face of a crazed woman. Suddenly, the other girls and teachers show up to find Ms. G crouched over Fiamma's lifeless body. Back at the school, the girls watch as police arrive to deal with the situation, and they ask Dai what's going to happen to them since they're the ones that caused this. They mention talking to Ms. G, but Dai knows that that's pointless. Still, they go to Ms. G's quarters to confront her about what Dai saw. Ms. G just tries to play it off like they can just move on from this, but the girls tell her that she doesn't deserve them anymore. She tries to remind them that they had part in this too, but there's no coming back anymore. Sure enough, Dai goes to Ms. Neven to confess. While Ms. Neven can appreciate her coming forward, she doesn't want to tarnish the school's reputation. Go figure, when someone steps up to do the right thing, politics get in the way of real justice. She just tells Dai that it was an act of God and that Ms. G will be taking a leave of absence to deal with this tragedy. I'm gonna need some reassurances that she's not going to come after me now. After Ms. G leaves, the girls read a note from Dai that talks about how she's leaving the school to travel like they always talked about. Sure enough, Dai's on the ferry, and she's setting off on her own adventure now. Then, the credits roll. While the setup in this movie was extensive and on the slower side, it led up to a nasty turn of events that I won't forget anytime soon. This movie has phenomenal acting and a storyline that leaves you questioning who's wrong for what. Give it a shot. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.